Friends, I welcome you to my channel. Before listening to this story, I will ask you to like and subscribe. It is not difficult for you, but it is pleasant for me. And we're starting. Martina Meadows. That Sunday afternoon, the August sun warmed the air in Atlanta to 32 degrees Celsius, so the Meadows family went to the public pool of their settlement to unwind a little. As they approached the gate and the fence surrounding the pool, Martine thought she recognized the figure sunbathing on a chaise long at the far end of the fence. "Hey, John, could you keep an eye on Kyle for a while? I'll go talk to Claire." "Come on, buddy. Let's play horse and rider." While the father and son were splashing noisily, Martine walked around the pool and went to Claire Garrison. The girls were not only friends, but also worked at 3 Insights, a fast-growing internet consulting company. Walking over to the chaise longue, Martine saw that Claire was wearing a thong-style bikini. The sun shone on her colleague's well-oiled buttocks like a beacon. Embarrassed, Martine looked down at her own swimsuit. Although it also consisted of 2 parts, it was more conservative than Claire's. As usual, Martine thought sarcastically. "Hey, Claire, are you provoking others?" Martine exclaimed, pulling a chair up to the blonde. At the sound of a familiar voice, Claire rolled over on her side. "No, I'm just sunbathing in the sun," she replied, not at all offended by her friend's teasing. After that, the 2 women started chatting about mundane topics, but when they started talking about work, Claire's expression suddenly became serious. "Can you keep a secret?" "What is it?" she asked, lowering her voice. Intrigued, Martine replied in the same low voice. "Absolutely." Claire leaned closer. She quietly confessed, "I'm having an affair." Martine recoiled in surprise. "Really? You're kidding, right?" "No, I swear. It's been going on for months now, and I'm dying to tell someone." Still doubting Claire's sincerity, Martine leaned over to her friend. "Who is this guy?" she demanded. "You have to promise not to tell anyone," Claire demanded. "Of course. You know you can trust me." "So, who is he?" A sly grin appeared on Claire's face. "This is Ivan. Ivan Ingersoll, our boss." "Now I'm sure you're lying. Keep your voice down. I don't want anyone to hear." "I can't believe it. Are you sleeping with an Iceman? A man made of ice?" The 2 women whispered animatedly for a long time, until they were interrupted by John's voice. "Hey, Martina, are you going to go swimming? Kyle is starting to get tired." Martine glanced at her watch and was surprised to discover how long she and Claire had been gossiping. "I'm sorry, honey," she shouted. "We got carried away. I'm on my way." When she got up to rejoin her family, Claire grabbed her wrist. "Remember," she said sternly, "not a word about this to anyone." Martine drew a cross over her heart and hurried back to John and Kyle. "What does it all mean?" John asked. "You were both very involved in the conversation." "Nothing important," Martine replied dismissively. "Just office chatter." Later, after the 3 of them took a shower to wash off the bleach from the pool, Martine began to pack an early dinner. Fortunately, they had leftovers, because her thoughts were clearly far from cooking. "I can't believe Claire is having an office affair. And with Ivan, the man of ice, who would have thought?" As she warmed up the food, she went over everything she knew about her boss. Ivan Ingersoll burst into the world as an internet prodigy. Known not only for his caustic quips, but also for his industry acumen, he quickly gained a reputation as a bad guy in the tech industry. His insightful article about the emergence of influential people on the internet attracted the attention of all figures of digital technologies, and he took advantage of his sudden fame by opening a successful consulting business, 3 Insights. Despite his reputation as a cold and demanding person, he quickly assembled a team of young, talented professionals who helped him sign contracts with some major players in the industry. But after working on his team for a year, Martina could hardly believe that Ivan Ingersoll was having an affair in the office. Of course, there are many attractive young women in his firm, but Martina has never heard gossip on this topic, at least until now. She knew that Ivan was married and believed that he was faithful to his wife Nadia. But now, thinking about it, Martina realized that she didn't even have a clear idea of what Nadia Ingersoll looked like. Martina remembered that she had seen this woman only briefly at some corporate dinner, and then it seemed to her that the wife looked older than her husband. But in fact, Martine gave most of her attention to Ivan that evening. After all, her boss was tall and slender, with black hair and a thin mustache that made his face both sophisticated and sly. Due to his reputation as a bad guy in the industry and his icy demeanor in the office, he was both a mysterious and attractive figure. Now, from what Claire had just told her, it seemed that there was more fire hiding under that surface than Martine could have imagined. And the fact that it was Claire who managed to melt that ice mask made him even more charming. I wonder if I would have been able to get his attention if I'd known he was free, she mused. Then she remembered the swimsuit she was wearing today. She shook her head. Not like this. However, her husband, apparently, reacted more positively to her appearance in the pool. After the couple put Kyle to bed, John tried to strike up a little romance. Martina quickly stopped this attempt. I have to go to work early tomorrow, she explained. Maybe later in the week. Despite his disappointment, Martina's husband managed to fall asleep quickly. But she had a harder time. Why did Ivan choose Claire? She asked herself, but the answer seemed obvious. Because of her big waist, which she constantly flaunts, Martine grinned, wishing once again that she had no more than a size 2. Isn't that what all the guys need? Why would Ivan Ingersoll be any different? With these unhappy thoughts, the girl finally fell asleep. The next morning, while John was getting Kyle ready for school, Martine stood in front of the mirror and summed up the results. Maybe I'm not big-lipped, but I have a lot of advantages. First of all, she thought, I'm taller than Claire, and my long legs are definitely slimmer. In addition, they start with a rounded waist, which always attracts male attention. I'm not a hound, she thought defiantly. As she dressed, she looked at the shoes she was going to put on and hesitated. These shoes don't paint my legs or my ass, she decided. Returning to the closet, she took out a pair of pumps with moderate heels. I can't instantly switch from Mary Jane shoes to stilettos, otherwise people will notice it. But I can start moving in the right direction. Pleased that the heels had given relief to her calves, she turned to the mirror to apply makeup. Starting to style her hair in a business bun, which she usually wore, she caught herself thinking, I don't want to look businesslike, I want to look beautiful. She quickly combed her dark brown curls, and they flowed over her shoulders like bitter chocolate. I will be able to return to the hairstyle of the old maid when I turn 80. Looking at herself from this new perspective, Martina began to think about other changes that she could make. But after evaluating myself in the mirror, I decided not to rush. That's enough for the first day. I don't want to overdo it. It did not occur to her to think about what the next steps might be, or to ask herself what they would lead to. When she went into the kitchen to have a quick cup of coffee, John noticed a change in her appearance. Hey, you let your hair down, baby. It suits you. She thanked him for the compliment, pleased that the changes she had made had been noticed. But the fact that her husband drew attention to her new image caused her anxiety. She reproached herself. You see, you should act slowly, girl. You can't make too many changes too quickly, otherwise John will start asking awkward questions. Over the next few weeks, Martina continued her transformation with slow, barely noticeable changes. Gradually, she increased the amount of makeup, making her eyes more expressive, emphasizing her cheekbones with blush and using a darker shade of lipstick. After visiting the mall, she bought several low-waisted bras and push-ups. I may not be able to match you in terms of boobs, Claire, but I can make what I have stand out more. To draw more attention to her feet, she continued to increase the height of her heels and also began to wear dark stockings, sometimes with a barely noticeable pattern. At the same time, she began to shorten her skirts, rolling them up at the waist. Pantsuits had practically disappeared from her wardrobe, replaced by sheath dresses and skirts with slits that teasingly revealed a view of her hips. While her transformation continued, Martine began to make more efforts to attract the attention of Ivan Ingersoll. At employee meetings, she kept her eyes on her boss, no matter who was speaking. Every time he glanced in her direction, she crossed her legs, hoping that he would see it. On her way to lunch, or when leaving work, she would pass by his office. And when she met him one-on-one, she always sat down, sticking out her body and exposing her legs so that her slit skirt was clearly visible to him. However, with each passing week, Martine became more and more disappointed. If Operation Ivan had any effect on the boss, she didn't notice it. He was businesslike all the time, but others definitely noticed it. Martina had just finished fixing her makeup while looking in the bathroom mirror when Claire Garrison burst in on her, clearly angry. "What the hell are you doing, Martine?" she hissed. Martine looked at her coldly. "I have no idea what you're talking about. Don't play games with me. I've seen the way you dress and the way you act with Ivan. You need to back off. He's mine, and I'm not going to let him go." Martine looked blankly at the irritated woman. "Then you have nothing to worry about, so get out of my sight." For a moment, Claire thought she might pounce on her, but the sound of someone entering through the outer door of the ladies' room stopped her. Claire glanced at her ex-friend, then turned and left. Martina calmly turned to the mirror to check her appearance again before leaving, and a faint smile played on her lips. 2 weeks later, during a staff meeting, Ivan made an announcement that caught both women off guard. "We just got the opportunity to give a presentation to a potential client in Chicago next week. I'm flying out on Monday. Martina, I want you to come and help us. You can get all the details of the trip from my secretary." Martina was caught off guard, but did not react. Claire, however, was not so delicate. "But, Ivan, I usually spend time with you visiting a client firm," she blurted out. "That's right," he replied. "But I think it's important that other team members can observe what's going on and contribute. Martina did a good job with analytics. It's time to introduce her to marketing. Cross-training is very important in an organization like ours, don't you agree, Claire?" She nodded sullenly, not wanting to look at either her boss or her rival. Martina returned to her cubicle in the open space. "It's happened. God, I didn't think he'd notice me, but he obviously did. It looks like you're not the only one who can melt the Iceman, Claire." However, after a minute, her self-doubt returned. What if I attach too much importance to this? What if this is nothing more than what Ivan was talking about, namely, an opportunity to practice a little? And when we get to Chicago, how should I behave with him? What should I say? All this weekend, excitement and anxiety were fighting in her, until even John noticed it. When he asked Martina about this, she honestly admitted that she was nervous about the upcoming trip, although she did not say anything except the obvious. "This is the first time I will be alone with him for a long time. I don't know how to behave." "You'll do fine, baby," John said, trying to support her. "You are smart and insightful, and you know your business. I have complete confidence in you. Remember, Ivan wouldn't have invited you if he wasn't sure about you. Just follow your intuition, and you will succeed." Hugging him in gratitude for his reassurance, she went into the bedroom to start packing. Looking at her things, she came to a decision. "Ivan wants me to be myself, otherwise he wouldn't have invited me. And he wants me to look like he's seen me in the office lately, not like before. So he gets a new Martina." Having made her decision, she began to fill her suitcase with a new wardrobe, from outerwear to shoes with the highest heels. She even included intimate lingerie that John had never seen. As they say, all or nothing? So, this girl will get everything. Ivan and Martine flew from Hartsville to the Windy City right after lunch on Monday. Despite the fact that the flight to O'Hare took less than 2 hours, Ivan was a fanatic about having enough time to prepare. Therefore, by late evening they were safely settled in rooms with lake views at the Peninsula Hotel. During the taxi ride, Ivan told Martine that he had already booked a table for the two of them for dinner. The prospect of an intimate dinner for two with Ivan delighted her. Having enough time to prepare, she spent more time on her hair and makeup. When everything was ready, she took out her tightest dress and her highest-heeled shoes to wear for the evening. When he went down to the lobby to meet her, she was already waiting for him, neatly positioned against a background of tropical plants. The restaurant he chose in downtown Chicago was both romantic and expensive. But, to Martine's horror, Ivan limited their conversation at dinner to purely work topics. And again she was seized with doubts. Did I misunderstand this situation? Maybe for Ivan, it's just another business trip and nothing more. When they took the elevator to the hotel after dinner, the boss surprised her again. "If you want to discuss anything else tonight, give me an hour to check my email, and then come to my room. I'll leave the door open." Once in her room, Martina felt insecure again. What should I do now? Does he want me to bring my laptop to review the presentation again? Or does he want to be alone with me? I can't not come. What does he really want? She took off the elegant dress she had worn to dinner and began to put on the only casual outfit she had brought with her. Suddenly, She remembered Claire threatening her in the bathroom. She'll be glad if I get away with it now, she thought, and her resolve strengthened. It's all or nothing, she admonished her reflection in the mirror. She quickly stripped naked and went to the bathroom mirror. There she applied makeup again and carefully smeared perfume in strategic places. Satisfied, she went to her suitcase and took out the negligee she had bought especially for this trip. When she put it hung on her shoulders with thin straps and reached to her ankles. The silky fabric was completely black, but so transparent that it enveloped her figure like smoke. If that doesn't cheer him up, then I don't know what. Checking the time, she was surprised to see that almost an hour had passed. She pulled on a terry cloth robe provided by the hotel so as not to walk down the corridor practically naked. Finally, she put on her stiletto heels again. Then she hurried to Ivan's room. Once in front of his door, she took a deep breath, knocked, and entered. Slamming the door behind her, she turned around and saw her boss sitting on the edge of the bed. He was also wearing a hotel bathrobe. He watched her enter in silence. My heart started pounding in my chest. She repeated it to herself one last time. I want everything, and let the robe slip off her shoulders, exposing her body covered with a thin negligee. Everything depended on him now. He looked at her intently and then beckoned with his hand. When she stood in front of him, he spread his knees, showing that he was naked under the robe. He wants it. He wants me. He waited until I took the first step. Looking into her eyes, he nodded his head down, and she immediately understood what he wanted. Kneeling in front of him, she pulled him towards her. God, I've never been so happy in my life. She was completely immersed in his service, so she was amazed when she felt his hands slide under her armpits. Before she could think that she had done something wrong, he lifted her up and then lay back on the bed, pulling her to him. Take me, he ordered in an authoritative voice. Joyfully obeying, she leaned forward and straddled his hips. Her fingers, which had become clumsy with joy, were tugging at the hem of her negligee. In the end, she pulled back the gauze cloth. Sensing that her body was in the right place, Martina hurriedly inserted his shaft into her swollen lips. There was no need for lubrication. Her body had been preparing for this from the moment she entered his room. Now that she was pressed against him, he entered her easily, reaching her cervix in one motion. She gasped at the delicious feeling of fullness and then began to rock back and forth. Closing her eyes, she felt a surge of emotion. The relief of knowing that he had wanted her all this time was combined with pride that her slow seduction had won him over. Of all the women in the office, she's the one who deserves the attention of the worst guy. At that moment, she wanted Claire to see her and learn about Martine's triumph. Don't play games you can't win, she exulted. But most of all, she felt animal lust. Involuntarily, her hips began to move up and down. The sensations increased until they became almost unbearable. When, in the midst of passion, Ivan suddenly reached out and squeezed her hard, she screamed, and her body shook in the strongest pleasure she had ever experienced. Her contractions inside must have pushed him too, because he exploded in his own climax as her body trembled on top of him. Then she fell on his chest, gasping from physical and emotional exhaustion. John Meadows. For John, it was a summer of dissatisfaction. Every week there was some minor nuisance that prevented him from enjoying life. To begin with, there were problems at the bank where he worked as a branch manager. The top management demanded that all departments reduce staff. The branches of banks, which initially had a small staff, were no exception. But, of course, there was no concomitant reduction in workload, so the rest had to get out of it. Not only was John busier than ever, but he also lost several good employees due to staff turnover. And then there's family life. As summer turned into autumn, Martine seemed more and more distracted, withdrawn into her own world. When he asked her about it, she brushed off his concern. There's just a lot at work. You know how it is. Everything will settle down soon. After their conversation, he had hope, but he did not notice any special changes in it. Moreover, it seemed that the load on her had increased. Now she often stayed late and often went to the office on weekends. I thought we were supposed to be partners, he grumbled to himself. Not to say that I was against taking on some of the housework, but it seems to me that I work full-time at the bank and full-time as a husband at home." When he told Martine about his feelings, she reproachfully reminded him of what she had to go through when John received his MBA degree. He had to admit that there was some truth in her words. It wasn't easy for her when he worked during the day and attended classes in the evening. He was an absent spouse then. Frustrated, he tried to rebuild his attitude, hoping that the pressure in her office would ease. Instead, things got worse. Suddenly, she started going on business trips, leaving for 2 or 3 days in a row. And when she was at home, the routine of late nights and weekends didn't stop. Fortunately, John's workload was flexible enough that he could take on the lion's share of responsibility for their son. John had to come to the bank for the opening, but he could take Kyle to school early and still get to the branch on time. In the same way, he arranged with his assistant manager to back him up after the bank closed. This allowed him to pick Kyle up from school and take him home. There he could remotely do daily reconciliation. But all this worked only if everything went according to plan. Sometimes it didn't happen. One Monday, when Martine went out of town for a week, Kyle brought home a note informing her that the school would be closed on Thursday and Friday during teacher training. John found himself in a difficult position. He needed to be at work, but there was no one he could ask to look after Kyle all day. He didn't want to set an example to his staff by claiming to be ill. With no options, John took his son with him to the bank and set him up in an empty office with enough books, toys, and crayons to keep him occupied, as he hoped. Shortly after lunch, John looked up and saw an attractive young woman with a child in the lobby of the bank. Everyone else was busy, and John came out to try to help her. "I'm Allison King, and this is my son Stevie," she said. "I have a problem with your bank's credit card," she explained. "Can you help?" John suggested to see what could be done. When he took her to his office, she took her son with her. "I hope you don't mind. Stevie's school is closed today, and I don't have anyone to babysit him." John looked at her carefully. "Does your son go to West Park Elementary School?" he asked. When she nodded, he explained, "I thought I knew you. My son Kyle goes there too." He gestured to the window facing the next office, where they could see Kyle playing. "I'm in the same boat as you," he laughed. "I guess we're both single parents," she replied. "Well, I'm not a loner, but my wife travels a lot, and she won't be in town this week. So I guess I'm a single parent." And then a thought struck him. "Listen, it may take some time to solve the problem with the credit card. Do you think Stevie would like to play with Kyle?" She immediately agreed, and the two of them took Stevie to the next office. "Hey, Kyle," John asked, "do you want to play with the new one?" "Hi, Stevie," Kyle interrupted, waving, and Stevie immediately replied, "Hi, Kyle." With these words, both boys sat down on the carpet and talked to each other. John looked at Stevie's mother with a smile. "Well, it was easy. They seem to be fine, so let's go and see if we can solve your problem." Solving her problem took longer than he expected, but in the end, John managed to contact the right people and solve it. Allison was extremely grateful. "Things are going a little tight right now, so solving this issue will help a lot." "I'm just glad I was able to help a good client," John replied. "And now let's see if these two have completely trashed the empty office." When they poked their heads through the door, they were delighted to find that there were no signs of destruction. Instead, the two boys sat at the table and drew monsters with markers on the printer paper that John had found earlier. Allison told Stevie that it was time for them to leave, and the adults were greeted by a chorus. "Oh, can't we play a little more?" Allison turned to John with a smile. They seemed to get along well. While helping to gather up the papers scattered around the room, she looked back at John and stood up. "Listen, you'll be in the same boat tomorrow, but I don't work on Fridays. Maybe Kyle can come to our city for a meeting? I'll be able to look after both of them." And from the looks of it, they really enjoy spending time together. John looked at the boys and then at Allison. He didn't know her very well, but she seemed like a caring mother to him. "And I'm completely desperate," he admitted to himself. "Are you sure that this will not create difficulties?" "What is it?" he asked politely. She grinned. "Let the boys decide for themselves." She turned to the teenagers. "Stevie, Kyle, would you like to have a play date at Stevie's house tomorrow?" The applause that greeted her proposal settled the issue. John spent the next day carefully monitoring his smartphone. He asked Allison to contact him immediately if she had any problems with the boys. Even though he treated her well, He kept imagining all sorts of crises that might arise. Therefore, when John heard the incoming SMS signal, he almost jumped out of his chair. But when he grabbed the phone, he saw that the text message was from Martina, telling him that she would be home only on Saturday afternoon. Damn it, he swore. He again? He was in a bad mood when he stopped by Allison's apartment after work, but the positive report she gave him at least mitigated the feeling of parental guilt. When Kyle whimpered, "Do we have to go, Dad?" John came up with an idea. Turning to Allison, he said, "Listen, I just found out that Martina won't be coming home until tomorrow, so Kyle and I are single again today. Would you and Stevie like to have dinner with us?" He deliberately made the offer loud enough for both Stevie and Kyle to beg, cutting off any objections Allison might have. "I have a better idea," she said. "Instead of worrying about choosing a place and driving, why don't we just order pizza and eat here?" This suggestion was also met with youthful enthusiasm, and John readily agreed. After the pizza was eaten and the boys went to play in Stevie's room, John sat down with Allison in the living room to relax. "Your wife's travel schedule seems to be pretty hectic," she said. "Yes, you could say that," he replied with a sigh. And suddenly he found himself venting all the frustration that had been building up in him for the past few months. When he realized what he had done, he immediately stopped. "I'm sorry, Allison. I didn't want to bore you with my sad story." "What's your story?" Now it was Allison's turn to feel awkward. "As you know, I am a single mother trying to survive. I don't usually tell people that I broke out of a painful marriage a few years ago and moved here to start over." "I'm sorry," John said sympathetically. "It looks like it was very bad." "To be honest, it was my fault," she said, surprising him. "Everything was happening so slowly that I didn't realize how bad it was until the night he gave me 2 black eyes at Stevie's. I knew I had to protect my son, and I called the police. It was terrible. My ex picked up a gun and shot one of them. I was really scared for Stevie. Anyway, my ex was sent to prison, and he's there for a long time." Seeing the concern on John's face, she quickly added, "But the good news is that he's completely disappeared from my life. We moved here, and now Stevie and I don't have to worry about him anymore." The conversation turned to more mundane topics, and when Allison mentioned school, John quickly checked the time. "It's almost time for Kyle to go to bed, and Stevie probably should too. It's time for us to go." "Of course," she said, standing up with him. Then she reached out to touch his hand. "Listen, John, if you need help with Kyle again, let me know. He and Stevie seem to get along well. If you ever have a hitch at work when your wife leaves, I can pick it up and keep it until you're free." He looked at her gratefully. "Thank you, Allison. I will definitely keep that in mind." He smiled. "And if you have any more problems with your credit cards or anything else, let me know." For 2 weeks after that, John's life went on quite normally. But suddenly, the slow stream of violations in his life turned into a downpour. The first sign of the coming chaos was the appearance of an unexpected visitor in his office, Claire Garrison. "Hi, Claire," John said, greeting her in his office. "What brings you here?" She frowned. "I want to know what you're going to do with your wife." He stared at her in confusion. "With Martine? I don't know what you're talking about. Are you really that distracted?" She snapped, her voice laced with venom and sarcasm. "She's having an affair with Ivan." John was stunned by her statement. At that moment, all the questions about Martina's behavior, which he had dismissed as unreliable, came flooding back to him. He felt as if he had been hit on the head. His instinctive reaction was denial. "This is crazy," he snapped. "She's not having an affair." It sounded weak even to him. He tried again. "How do you know that? What proof do you have?" Claire rolled her eyes. "God, John, isn't it obvious? Haven't you noticed how she dresses for work? Slit skirts, push-up bras, extra makeup? Do you really think she turned into a fool for you?" Now she was carried away. "What do you think she really does when she supposedly works in the evenings and on weekends? I can assure you that there aren't that many people in the office. And what about all these business trips she makes with him? Do you really believe that she's not in his hotel room every night?" It seemed to him that every question she asked was a blow to his heart. Angry and defensive, he tried to go on the offensive. "Why are you here, Claire? Why is all this about you?" To his surprise, her face turned red and tears welled up in her eyes. Panting with excitement, she screamed. Because Ivan was mine, and I want him back. Her passion shocked him, and the last thing he wanted was to get into an argument with a jealous woman in front of his staff. Standing up abruptly, he said, "If there's nothing else to say, I think it's time for you to leave." She was amazed. "Wait a minute, what are you going to do with all this?" Her simple question hit him hard. "I really don't know," he replied in a hushed voice. Then, with difficulty pulling himself together, he said firmly, "Goodbye, Claire." She glared at him for a moment longer, then turned and left the bank. When she left, John fell back into his chair, feeling the full force of Claire's accusations threatening to overwhelm him. He was filled with self-loathing. Why didn't I notice that? All summer long, all the signs were there. Other senses were fighting for his attention. Outrage that Martine might have cheated on him, struggled with despair at the prospect of losing what he considered a happy marriage. Concern about how all this might affect his son was coupled with horror at what his own life would look like. And looming over all of this was the question that Claire demanded of him: what should I do now? His first impulse was to meet Martine and demand the truth. But he dismissed that thought just as quickly. If she's cheating on me, she'll just deny it. What should I do then? And then another thought struck him. What if Claire is lying? What if this is all a conspiracy against Martina? Claire is clearly overcome with jealousy. If I accuse Martine of cheating, it will play into Claire's hands. Of course, Martine wouldn't do anything like that. Having an affair with the boss is such a cliché. She's not that stupid. Trying to pull himself together, he took a couple of deep breaths. The only way to sort out this mess is to start by finding out the truth. Once I've done that, I'll be able to determine the next steps. He felt himself sinking back into helplessness. But how do I do it? I barely have enough time to go to work and take care of Kyle. I can't spy on her even if I knew how, and I don't have a single private investigator I know. But now, having recovered a little from the initial shock, he began to think more rationally. I may not know any good detectives, but I think I know someone who could do it. While John joined the business department after graduation, his college roommate, Max Hardison, went to law school. Now his friend has his own law practice in the suburbs of Atlanta. John called him, and when Max greeted him joyfully, John warned him that this was not a friendly call. He quickly explained the situation and then outlined his immediate problem. "I don't want to act rashly, Max, relying only on the words of a jealous colleague. I need proof. That's why I need a reliable detective agency that can make inquiries about Martin and her boss Ivan Ingersoll. Do you have any recommendations?" Max understood everything right away. "Yes, there are several people I trust who are involved in such cases. I'll call them now. I hope they will contact you today. And John, I'm really sorry, buddy. I hope this turns out to be a false alarm." An hour later, John received a call from a certain Lyman Mazrov, who introduced himself as the head of the Mazrov Inquiries Company. He sent John the URL of his agency's website and then asked a potential client about his requirements. After John spoke about his suspicions about what happened in the summer, Mazrov offered his recommendation. "I understand that you are hoping for quick work on this project. In this case, we may be able to avoid round-the-clock surveillance. If you can figure out your wife's work schedule, we can choose one or two situations where she will have the greatest opportunity to be indiscreet. If it passes the test in these cases, your fears may not be justified." "That sounds reasonable, Mr. Mazrov. But the most likely opportunity that will present itself to her is a meeting in Chicago. She's leaving on Monday, and she won't be in town until Friday. I think it might suit us," Mazrov said thoughtfully. "In my experience, people usually lose their vigilance when they are outside the city because they assume that no one knows them there." "Does your agency work in Chicago?" John asked skeptically. "And no, but we work with one of the agencies there. If you give me the details of her plans, I think we can put them under surveillance when they get there." Martina always told John the route of her trip in case of unforeseen circumstances, so John was able to pass it on to Mazrov. He also sent him the URL of the III website, which had photos of Ingersoll and Martina. John could almost hear Mazrov thinking as he looked through the schedule John had provided. After a moment of silence, the detective spoke. "Our best opportunity will be the hotel, and we should aim for the evening of their arrival. If they are in a relationship, then after the flight they will be in anticipation, and we'll want to relieve tension in the privacy of a hotel room. My friends in Chicago have good relations with most of the major hotels. It will cost you extra money to bribe, but I think they will be able to shoot videos while they are in the room." He paused. "Mr. Meadows, there are no guarantees, but my gut tells me that we'll know something by the end of the week. If we don't get anything under these circumstances, I think you can relax and we won't have to spend your money anymore. How do you like that?" "That sounds good." "Okay. And the last thing. Max can confirm this, but any video evidence that we collect will not be accepted in court." "I understand that. I'm just trying to find out the truth. I think we can do that. Anyway, I'll let you know as soon as we have something definite." Feeling better for having taken some positive steps, John prepared for the evening, trying to behave naturally with Martina. But when she texted him that she was planning to stay at work again, John felt relieved that he wouldn't have to test his acting skills. And when she was late at the office again on Saturday and Sunday, John focused all his attention on Kyle. "The time spent with my son was bittersweet. I really would not like Kyle to live in a single-parent family," he thought sadly as they played ball together. As usual, Martina took the afternoon flight to O'Hare on Monday, so John barely saw her before she hit the road. That's a good thing. His stomach wouldn't be able to handle the strain if he had to communicate with her for any length of time. On Thursday morning, John got a call from Mazrov, which he was so afraid of. "Mr. Meadows, I'll be honest. Your wife is definitely in a permanent relationship with her boss, Ivan Ingersoll. They slept together the whole trip, not even bothering to book separate rooms." John couldn't help but groan. Ignoring this, Mazrov got down to business. "A courier will deliver a package to your office this afternoon. There will be 3 envelopes inside. One has a memory card with video recordings of their stay in the room. The other contains a transcript of their conversations together in the room, in case any audio recordings are unclear. The third envelope will contain a set of photos taken based on the video. Now listen to me carefully. I have 2 very important instructions for you, based on several decades of work in this business. First, do not do anything that could harm your spouse or her lover. If you do this, I will be obliged to report my findings and this conversation to the police. This means that you acted with intent, which will significantly increase the punishment that you will suffer at the hands of the law. Do you understand this?" "Yes," John said quietly. "I'm not a violent person, Mr. Mazrov, and I promise I won't attack anyone." "All right," the detective said. "Secondly, I strongly recommend that you look only at the photos. They are carefully selected to show the relationship between your wife and Mr. Ingersoll, so there can be no doubt about their personalities or activities. If you wish, you can read the transcript of their conversations. Some of them are irrelevant, and some of them can hurt you. But since it's a text, it won't have the same emotional impact as a video. I strongly recommend that you do not watch the video. You have a small child, which means that you will most likely have to constantly communicate with your wife. Video combined with sound creates an emotional experience that you will not be able to forget. These impressions will make it much more difficult for you to work together in the interests of your son. I hope you will take this advice to heart. I know more than one spouse who did not do this and regretted it afterwards. It's in your best interest to move forward rather than dwell on anger and painful memories." John took a deep breath. "Thank you, Mr. Mazrov. I promise not to harm anyone and I will take note of your second advice." "That's all I can ask, Mr. Meadows. You will also find the invoice for our services in the package." "Good luck, sir." The courier delivered the package just before John left to pick up Kyle, so he carefully placed it on the passenger seat of his car, like some kind of deadly reptile that he didn't want to wake up. When the father and son returned home, John immediately called Allison King. "Do you have a chance to pick Kyle up from school tomorrow and keep him at your place for the night? I need to have a serious talk with my wife when she gets home, and I wish Kyle hadn't heard that." "Oh, John, that sounds ominous. I am so sorry. As for tomorrow, of course Kyle can stay with us. Stevie will be thrilled. Just don't forget to call the school tomorrow and tell them that I'll pick them both up. And John, if there's anything else I can do, just tell me. I'll be thinking about you." "Thank you, Allison. You just saved my life." After putting Kyle to bed, John returned to the living room and carefully opened the package containing the ruins of his marriage. He immediately noticed a small envelope labeled "memory card" and put it aside. He was surprised by the weight of a large envelope with the inscription, "Transcript." He also put it aside. He opened the envelope marked "Photographs." The 20 by 30 photos were face down, and when he turned the stack over, his heart sank. He knew what to expect, but now there was no doubt, no room for ambiguity. Frame by frame, Ivan and Martina were clearly captured in one pose after another. Were they trying to implement the Kama Sutra? John asked himself in disgust. But his contempt could not hide the torment he felt when he saw the woman he loved giving herself so completely and uninhibitedly to another. After reviewing the entire collection with dates and times, he put the photos in an envelope and leaned back on the sofa. His mind was filled with grief and anger. What a fool I was, trying to be a good husband to a woman who is so willing to fornicate with her boss. Emotionally exhausted, he decided that he couldn't take it anymore that evening. He took all 3 envelopes to his home office. There he locked them in his desk so that Cal wouldn't accidentally find them. It's not going to be easy for the poor kid anyway, and then his mother is acting like a fool. After hiding the evidence, John went to his bedroom, turned off the light, and collapsed on the bed. Despite all the emotions churning in his brain, he fell asleep in a matter of minutes.